Can you ever truly know if somebody loves you? That's the question at the heart of Curry Barker's brilliant and disturbing movie Obsession, and it is one of the most personal, but also one of the most philosophical questions that we can ask ourselves. And I'd argue that Obsession has a pretty clear, very compelling answer to that question, but we'll get to that in a second. We'll also get to the controversial incel argument it's sparked online too. But if you haven't seen it, then please fire up the old streaming service and give it a watch, because it is a great / devastating horror film. And I want to spoil all of it by talking about it, because so many of those scenes are just living rent-free in my head now. And I want to talk about the car scene. No, not that one, not just yet. But the car scene where Bear rings customer service because he's starting to realise that maybe his dumb wish has come true. And he asks the question,
is her love real?
And the service rep, pretty much over these crazy calls by now, answers,
just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real.
Which, I mean, what even is that? Is love something you can force on another person, that you can choose for them? And why is Bear asking? Doesn't he have enough proof at this point? Isn't the answer obvious? Or is he starting to realise that he's had evidence of how Nikki felt all of this time and he's just ignored it because he's desperately hoped that something else might be true? And most importantly, does Bear need that love to be absolutely true, because otherwise he's just committed the most heinous of crimes? It's a tangled emotional web, and as I mentioned, I think it's a deeply philosophical one too, as love and choosing are almost metaphysical conundrums to us. We'll hear from Jean-Paul Sartre and Iris Murdoch and others who spent their careers debating this problem, but it all stems from a brilliant little horror film, whose implications are enormous and tangled and complicated, but whose premise is really very simple. What if you wished that someone else loved you and you got what you wished for? So let's try and figure this out. Love, is it romantic or a horror? On the latest episode of Philosophical Film Club. So yes, I think Obsession is a fantastic horror film, and I'd encourage you to see it, even if you're not normally a horror person. Although be warned, it is confronting and violent, but it's also created a firestorm. A lot of people have filed it under the incel horror label, because it seems like a lonely man forces himself into an innocent woman's life and he gets his comeuppance. And look, I do get that reading. I understand exactly where it comes from, but I also think it's a way of letting ourselves off the hook, because yes, Bear is absolutely guilty. He's done something terrible, and another person who he ostensibly cares about is being tortured. The service rep basically reveals it on that phone call in the car, and Bear kind of chooses to ignore it. So we'll get to all of that too very soon, but he is guilty. But the question for us is, how guilty? And what about us? What should we take from this cursed little monkey paw morality tale? Because my suspicion is that we're all a little guilty of being like Bear. So that's what I want to get in today. And I want to look at 4 really important things. First, let's get into the deep psychological and epistemological insecurity that runs underneath the film. The problem of having feelings for someone and never truly knowing whether the feeling is returned or perhaps even fake. Then we need to talk about the nature of love and of choosing, what we'd call the metaphysical question under all of it, and whether we can ever actually choose to love somebody at all. And thirdly, we'll get into the incel angle of it all, and the terror of being loved so obsessively, so completely, that it stops being about the love and starts being about something horrifically else. And finally, we'll get into the grand debate, the case for the prosecution and the defense, and whether it's telling us something much bigger than whether this nice guy is the worst. But first, every horror movie has a twist, right? I mean, of course, it's what makes horror movies horror movies. It's that moment when they pull the rug out from under you and you either smack yourself in the head saying, of course, the clues were all there, the movie did its job, it fooled you, or you feel pretty smug because you have a galaxy brain and you had it figured out from Act 1 and you turn to tell your friends and they're not there because they're sick of you spoiling movies for them. Yes, it's the M. Night Shyamalan moment, the thing he became famous for and then infamous for. Every horror movie has to have one these days, but Obsession doesn't. Curry Barker just follows the cold, hard logic of a man getting what his heart most desires and the almost inevitable consequences, the questions it raises and the costs. Everything that you think will happen in Obsession, well, it basically happens. And that should be a bad horror movie, right? But it really isn't. It's brilliant because Obsession knows we've seen horror movies before, and it also weaponizes the fact that its characters don't know that they're in a horror movie, and it uses all of that against us to perfect effect. Take that gruesome conversation in the back half of the film, for example, the one in the car that I've been alluding to. We've all seen enough at this point to know exactly what's going to happen. Of course we do. And yet it's just so tense, waiting for that other shoe to drop. And when it does, for me, it was almost a relief, as strange as that sounds. The terrible thing we knew was going to happen is here. It's finally happened. But it's also so much worse than we thought. I bring all of this up because this is how the movie works on us as the audience throughout. It knows our insecurities. It knows what we should be thinking in certain scenarios. It kind of knows how we'll react, and it uses it like an ironclad logic against us. The other thing that I think it uses against us is just how ordinary, how everyday a lot of these emotions and these dramas and these lived experiences are that it's putting on screen. We've all had an unrequited crush, and whether we confess it or not, we know how badly it usually ends. We've all been the target of that kind of unwanted attention too. So when the movie opens, we're in a weird place. We're both metaphorically and emotionally on both sides of the camera, and it opens with,
"I think about you all the time, Nikki. And I try not to. You're in every song I listen to. You were the only person that was nice to me when I moved here. And at first I thought maybe you'd... Well, I realized who you are. And then after Nana passed, you were the one that called. Even when I didn't have anything to say and we just sat there. So I keep telling myself, don't tell her she's too good. You'll lose her. But maybe you should know that I would choose you over everything.
And I really do want to start here too, because the debate around Obsession has become kind of a court case. Is Bear guilty? How could he have known? Should he have known? Are all nice guys terrible? And I definitely want to hear your take in the comments too. But here, Bear is almost structuring his crush like a court case. He's presenting evidence, he's pleading, he's making an argument for why Nikki should be in love with him because he's so in love with her. It's the presentation of both sides here that I want to keep highlighting because it happens throughout the film and it makes us partially sympathize with Bear because we've all been here. We've all loved someone so much that it seems impossible that the world would be so unjust that the other person wouldn't feel the same way. And yet, it happens. It happens every day. But the subtle other side being presented here too is that all this evidence is about Bear and about his feelings. We get no insight into Nikki from that scene at all. The other side of the argument is just never presented, which as potential jurors and viewers, this makes us a little squeamish, right? It almost seems as if Bear believes that love can be forced through proof, through argument, through evidence. And the movie does something like this on a structural level as well that I like to think of as the Ari Aster move. You know it if you've seen Hereditary or Midsommar or some of his other films. The protagonist starts in a vulnerable, fragile, unbalanced place. In this case, Bear's Nana has just died. And I hate when horror movies do this, but yeah, his poor cat is going to go through a horrible accident and isn't long for this world either. So he's completely psychologically off balance in a way, which doesn't excuse him. It just makes everything that happens to him and everything he does so much more heightened and destabilizing. It also quiets our shouts a little of, doesn't he realize he's in a horror movie? Because of course he doesn't. This is just real, horrible, unfair life to him, and he has only one thing to hold on to, and it's Nikki. But again, Nikki and her side of things, what's going on with her choices or feelings, haven't even made an appearance yet, which is also unsettling. But it's also classic, right? Because so often our passions don't run on considering the other person. They're run by their very nature on the one-sided, but it's also probably why we shouldn't be ruled by them, which is what Plato and those guys argued all those millennia ago. But it's also what obsession is running on. Nothing terribly supernatural or monstrous, just the bare minimum for a horror movie, really, in the way our twisted psyches kind of do the rest of the work. This film is the horror of the deeply insecure everyday that we all experience. But the one supernatural element is the wish, getting what we wished for. Bear wanders into a junk shop and he finds the One Wish Willow sitting on a shelf next to the crystals, and it costs $7, and it looks like something you get from a beach town gift shop, a bit of a joke really, right next to the shot glasses. It's not an ancient tome or Friday the 13th or some kind of freaky supernatural accident. It seems completely banal and innocent. Why should Bear expect this corny piece of crap to work? Now the clerk does warn him, but who would believe him? I mean, if I was at my local, I wouldn't. I'd be backing away from that clerk slowly if he said something like that. So that night, the thing happens. It works. Bear gets what he wished for. And we barely even glimpse Nikki's side of things. But Bear does question it, at least at first. He knows that something is a little bit wrong, despite his passion and his deeply held wish. There's still that insecurity there, lurking underneath somewhere, and enough of an appreciation of the reality of their friendship for Bear to say, hey, this is sudden. This is a little bit weird. So I note in the film that Bear actually sleeps on the floor that night. He doesn't do anything more. Nothing happens. But the dream has arrived, and it's arrived in a form he really can't trust. Nicky builds a shrine to his dead cat, which is one of the weirdest things that I've seen in a horror movie and kind of should have been the red flag right there. But of course, he doesn't know he's in a horror film and this person he's known for years. So she watches him sleep in the corner of the room. She tapes the front door shut and stands vigil beside it. Like, Bear's in too deep now. And barely half an hour into this relationship he wished into existence, she is screaming at him. Which, okay, comeuppance arrived. I've noticed that quite a few reviewers and commenters talk about this film like it's a comedy that turns into a horror movie, but I don't buy that at all. We do know it's a horror movie, and it's that car scene on a grand scale the whole way through. It's like one continuous ratchet. It's a man living with the consequences of one dumb, thoughtless action, and the mounting evidence, or the mounting consequences, perhaps, are just the tightening of that ratchet or those screws a quarter turn at a time per scene. And look, the confession was extreme. The wish was insane. But who among us hasn't wished something like that? Casually, even on a daisy, saying, they love me not. But the thing underneath all of this, the collecting evidence that someone must feel the way you need them to feel. Be honest, you've built that file. We all have. It's human nature. So that's where we start here, with a deep epistemic insecurity about love, about being loved, but that could really be about anything. And obsession inverts the horror, like the few classic horror films do, in by not being about the extraordinary, but by being about the everyday. And in doing so, it points out our own insecurities, and it kind of indicts us too. If Bear is guilty of motivated reasoning and of only seeing one side and of wishing poorly, then aren't we all? But it gets worse. Because let's go back and let's think about Bear's list, about why he thinks Nikki must be having feelings for him. We've all put together a list like this, as I've said, but the most important thing about it is that all of that evidence, all of those things on that list, it could have been otherwise. Evidence is only evidence if it's telling us one thing and excluding others. So think about that for a minute, because a kiss matters because it could have been refused. A confession matters because silence was possible. Somebody staying matters because leaving was absolutely on the table, and they looked at the door and they chose to stay. Every gesture of love you've ever noticed or ever received carried meaning for exactly one reason. The person didn't have to. So that's what evidence is in this kind of scenario. And Bear's wish takes exactly that could have been otherwise away. Wish Nikki cannot but love Bear because it's metaphysically off the menu not to, which means that every single thing she does, every kiss, every declaration, every act of devotion, that tells him nothing, which is weird when you think about it, because the supposed signs of her love They haven't just stopped arriving, they're everywhere. They've just stopped meaning anything. Bear wanted proof that she loved him, and the wish has given him endless evidence, but no proof. Plus, the more she gives him, the less he can trust any of it. And a certain French philosopher you might well know worked out this exact trap almost 80 years ago, sitting in a cafe in Paris. His name was Jean-Paul Sartre, and his doorstop of a work was Being and Nothingness. In it, Sartre says that the lover wants something very strange. He doesn't want to possess the beloved the way you possess, say, an object. Because love from a puppet or from a machine or from a body with nobody home, that is, to most of us, worthless, and every lover knows it deep down, even if they might deny it. What the lover wants is to possess a freedom freely given as a freedom. He wants to be loved by a free being, someone who could absolutely walk away. And he wants that free love guaranteed, locked in, certain. And you can see the problem immediately, right? A guarantee is exactly the thing that freedom cannot promise, that cannot survive. The moment you secure it, you've turned the free being into the puppet, and the puppet's love becomes the worthless kind because it isn't chosen and it can't be taken away. Sartre thought that this contradiction wasn't just something that happened in bad relationships. He thought it was the nature of love itself, the impossible demand that every lover is secretly making of their love. And Bear, poor guy, just purchases it with a one-wish willow. And before anyone files this under some kind of exotic pathology or mental illness, wanting to be chosen and wanting the choosing to be safe and wanting to know that your overture will be received before you risk anything, that isn't a disorder. It's basically the structure of wanting to be loved. All of us are making a milder version of Bear's wish every time we fish for reassurance or a compliment or something from a loved one instead of asking them the terrifying question directly. The wish doesn't invent the demand. It just capitalizes on it. Which is why, an hour into this film, with the wish working perfectly, with Nikki devoted to him beyond any romantic fantasy he's ever had or ever wanted, Bear is on that phone to customer service, pretty freaked out by it. So let's go back to that call. Because at the top of this video, I gave you the headline of it. But there's more to the call than that, particularly because Bear in the call doesn't want to undo the wish. Instead, he asks whether he can alter the wish. Alter. He wants to keep the love but lose the creepy side effects, or keep the fantasy but cancel the consequences. And the rep, bored, half listening, probably thinking about lunch, offers him a way out by saying,
I'd like to cancel your wish.
No. It's okay to keep the. I just want to know if I can, like, alter it a little.
I'm sorry, we don't really do that.
And Bear, old buddy, those no's. That's where the prosecution steps up and sets up their entire case. And then he asks the question that he actually cared about, that he really wanted to ask.
If you have any questions about how the wish works, or if you read the back of the box.
I mean, is it even real?
Yeah, it's real.
No, I know that is her love real?
Just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real.
Okay, then I would like to cancel.
You'd like to file a cancel request?
Yes, a cancel request.
We don't really do that.
What?
We don't really
You were
do
just
that.
making it sound like I could put in a
I was
request.
just guessing your intention, man.
What the hell? What can I do then?
Nothing really.
Which again is classic Jean-Paul Sartre, if you've read him, and incidentally central to his understanding of the nature of freedom and choice. He even has a whole example about a guy sitting in a room who doesn't get up and leave as an example of freedom with the door locked. But the exit was open when Bear didn't want it, which is interesting. He's freely choosing, but it's bricked up the moment that he does. So was he ever truly free? Was he ever choosing? These are very Sartrean questions. Whether it was ever really open, the film declines to say. And honestly, that's a bit of the crueler choice, really, isn't it? This is why it lives rent-free in my head. I wonder about it. It's the monkey paw operating inside a single phone call. And then the rep offers to put Nikki on the line, and it's the most horrifying scene in the film by far. I won't replay it here because I cannot go through it again. But for many, that's where their understanding of Bear ends, and it's kind of when mine comes short too. I mean, how can he go on after hearing that torture, that that capture, that whatever it is, that screaming entity inside Nikki that's desperate to get out. It's horrible. And yet, as he's told by the service rep, there's no way out except his own death. Which again, no way out. This truly is an existentialist's film, isn't it? That voice on the phone, by the way, is director Curry Barker, which is a really nice touch. He's the one putting them all through this philosophical torture, and he sounds like he gets these annoying calls all the time. So we get that Wish Nikki's love, her behaviour, whatever it is caused by the One Wish Willow. But the metaphysically savvy amongst you might be asking, do we ever choose, though? Like, isn't love always caused by something? Whether it be proximity or chemistry or timing or loneliness, the hormone cocktail our body serves to us without asking, the fact that they were kind to you in the exact week you were falling apart, one phone call after Nana died. Nobody reasons their way into love from first principles, and nobody signs a consent form before falling in love. By the standard romantic logic of it doesn't count if something made it happen, then nothing has ever counted. Maybe none of us is choosing. Maybe we are all, every one of us, obsessed. And the lucky ones are just the ones who got obsessed with someone that was getting obsessed back. And there are two philosophers, Brian Earp and Julian Savulescu, who wrote a whole book about this. It's called Love Drugs, and it asks, if a pill could deepen the love between two consenting partners, would that love be fake? And they conclude that as much as we would like to think so, it's hard to say no. Love never comes from nowhere. People in arranged marriages fall into love that is real by every measure that we have. Chemistry is chemical, sure, but the rep's answer isn't a cheat. It's a live philosophical position with a bibliography attached if you're interested in it. But is the film saying that Nikki's love is real? And by the language of the film, cinematography, character, everything that goes on and we witness, the answer's clearly no to that. So there's a distinction, because for me, causation doesn't void love, but coercion does. The problem was never that Nikki's love has a cause. The problem is what Nikki can't do with it. She can't step back and reflect on the feeling. She can't refuse it. She can't revise it. She can't leave it or come back to it or choose it again next year as a slightly different person. Real love is caused, and then it's endorsed. It's taken up and it's owned and it's made yours over time in freedom. Nikki has been handed the feeling and then denied everything that would let her make it hers. Her love fails for one reason. She was never asked. And Nikki knows that. She is the one person in the film who knows with total certainty exactly how she feels, what her love is, which may sound like it should be a mercy, but instead, it's the worst thing that happens to anyone in this movie. So there's a critique of this film that I think is fair, but is also wrong in my estimation. But there's a good argument for it. That's what I'm trying to say. It is that by gluing itself to Bear's point of view, the movie risks sidelining and minimising or dismissing Nikki's ordeal. The woman at the centre of the horror, the real victim here, risks becoming an ornament to somebody else's moral crisis. But I think the film is actually clever in that, and it is actually enhancing the horror of Nikki's point of view. It is showing us Nikki's side indirectly, through a call, through the manic implausibility of her actions, through that horrific party scene. For me, she's very much the other half of the film. She's the twisted mirror, if you will, because Bear cannot know if Nikki's love is real or not, but Nikki does, and she just can't be heard. He's tortured by uncertainty, but she's tortured by a certainty that nobody else can access. Instead, her body testifies against her. Her voice speaks against her. Her face, her affection, her hands, every instrument a person has ever used to say that this is what's true inside of them has been reassigned or handed over to the wish. She is locked inside the world's only perfect lie, and the lie is her. So Bear can't get access to Nikki's inner life, and Nikki can't get her inner life recognised by anyone. It's the same nightmare, really, but it's kind of from opposite ends. It's the fact that what happens inside a person is invisible, and everything we use to show it can be faked, which makes the party scene, for me, so tragic. Because from Nikki's perspective, it's a brief moment of testimony that everybody should heed. And from everybody else's perspective, it's a moment of craziness that they'd rather ignore and dismiss. At that point, self-destruction is all she has. And then the film gives her, very briefly, actual words.
Please don't wake her up. Just kill me.
Yes, this really wrecks me because that's Nikki whispering from inside her own body so the self that has invaded her won't hear. And Bear, confronted with the person he loves, conscious, present, and begging for death, Bear says,
What would be so bad? What's so bad about being with me?
Now, that line is the moment that the internet convicted him, and fair enough, it is nice guy logic to still to a single sentence. It is her torture, rerouted through his own ego, indicting him in a few words. But everyone quotes his question. Almost nobody stays for her answer, and her answer is one of the most devastating lines in the film.
I've never been with you, Bear.
Yeah, it's not this isn't working or even you have to let me go. It's I've never been with you. The relationship that Bear is defending, the one that he's mourning and managing and getting his ego invested in and making excuses for, it's never existed. There was no us that went wrong. That was his fantasy. And then there was his wish enforcing it. Everything he thought was a shared world was actually a private one that ran on coercion. And before we get into that problematization of a curse, have you felt the shadow of this line? I mean, anyone who's been broken up with has kind of felt it. That vertigo, when somebody describes the relationship you were both in and you don't recognize it, and you realize the thing you were living inside was, at least partly, yours alone, is devastating. And his question was an ordinary one that I think a lot of us has asked too. What's so bad about being with me? Is the question that's underneath every wounded breakup conversation ever had. It's just that most of us usually have the decency to only think it and not to actually say it. The film's cruelty is saying all of those private thoughts out loud. And then we get to that grim, awful car scene where Bear is told the truth, and we realise, as the audience, that Bear should have realised a long time ago that Nikki wasn't into him. A long, long time ago. And it's tragic because it's so relatable. Again, I keep saying it, I think we've all been there. That's the power of the film. Bear just has the misfortune of having a random supernatural force come into his life, get mixed into it, and then accidentally reveal what he would wish and what he would do and the price everyone pays. I think that for me, the moment that Bear is truly condemned is when he moves poor Sarah's body. Now, we're getting towards the close of the film with this, and things are truly off the rails here. Like, everybody's in a horror story and they don't know it because they don't have time to breathe. But there's this terrible line from Nikki near the end of the film that shows that not only is real Nikki being tortured and bewildered, but maybe wish Nikki is too. She says,
Sorry for the theatrics. I don't know why I do that.
It's okay, sweetie.
and that for me is at the core and the passion bit of obsession. The bit that Sartre's cool, collected idea of choosing kind of discards, and yet for many of us remains a crazy part of love that we can't avoid. Nevertheless, when we're in love, we don't think we choose, and we don't know why we do it. We don't know why we fall for somebody, for that person. We don't know why we're crushed by it. It's such a clever film, and I think it draws out that really unsettling part of the nature of any form of love, which brings us to the end. And the end is where the movie stops whispering about all of this, if it, after that brick, it has ever been whispering. But at the very end, Nikki gets hold of a will of her own and she uses it. She wishes for Bear to love her in the same way. And think about that. Nobody on earth knows better than Nikki that a wished-for love is worthless. She's just spent the entire film trapped inside one, and she still makes the wish. And it's unclear whether it's real Nikki or wish Nikki. I mean, it's got to be wish Nikki, right? But anyway, the film's final bleakest point seems to be that the desire to be loved with certainty is so deep that even its own victim can't resist wishing for it. So the movie ends with total clarity about Bear's guilt and no clarity at all about what anybody actually felt. And that's the position that we're all in, curse or no curse, in real life, all the time. It makes the point that you can't ever know what somebody did. You can never fully know what was real inside of them, which is exactly the fear that the film runs on. And it's worth asking why so many people were so quick to insist that that fear absolutely belongs to somebody else. So let's have the argument, because I promised you at the start that I'd take the incel reading seriously, and here it is at full strength. Fangoria has called this film an incel monkey's paw. Michael Johnson, Bear himself, the actor, has described the character as a new kind of horror villain, the nice guy. And the evidence really is right there on the screen. It's a man who treats a woman as the answer to his own self-worth problems, who blames the object of his affection for the pain of his affection, whether he means to or not, who responds to her begging for death by asking, hey, what's so wrong with him being lovable? What's so wrong about him? There's entitlement, there's self-pity, there's a wounded ego wearing devotion as a kind of costume. All of this is in the movie and on the screen, and the movie put it there on purpose, no doubt about it. It wanted you to be able to make this kind of reading. But noticing those things doesn't tell you what the film is about, in my view, because if this is a movie about incels, then big chunks of it kind of stop making sense. Why is Bear calling a hotline to ask whether her love is real when he already has everything he wanted? An entitled man who got the girl should be satisfied. This should be perfect for him. But Bear is more insecure than ever, and the film spends the rest of its runtime on that. Plus, what does male entitlement have to do with, as I've said, Nikki's half of the nightmare? I think it really is presented, knowing the truth about her own feelings and being unable to make anybody believe her. And why does the film end with her making the same wish Bear did? On the incel reading, that ending doesn't really matter. It's just noise. It's an aside. Maybe it's just the ironclad horror logic of Wish Nikki. Okay, if so, fair enough. The incel reading explains Bear's worst moments, but for me, it has nothing to say about the film's best ones. So why did it become a popular reading of the film? Honestly, I think because it's quite a comfortable reading. It puts Bear in a box marked those weird guys on the internet, and once he's in the box, the rest of us are off the hook, aren't we? We don't have to admit that we know exactly how he got there, because we've all had that hopeless crush. We've all read too much into a kind word or a phone call that came at the right moment. We've all handled rejection badly. And none of that makes anyone a monster. It just makes us human. And hopefully with caring family or wise friends that can help steer us away from the worst parts of it. But it's the same material that Bear's character is made of. Yes, he takes it somewhere monstrous, step by step, and we watched him do it. And the label lets us pretend that the starting point was foreign too, that we would never start there and we would never end up there either. I think we also judge him pretty harshly too, because he's in a horror movie, and we know that. We'd all behave differently, and we'd all make more obvious choices if we knew we were a protagonist contending with horror movie logic and supernatural forces. But of course Bear and the others in the film don't know that, at least at first. If I came to you tomorrow and insisted that someone fell in love with me because of a wish I'd made, you'd have me institutionalized. I think another essential point too is that we live in relation to the extremes that exist within the world, whether we want to or not. And pretending we don't is the whole appeal of putting Bear in that box. Why we'd like to dismiss this movie as about just incels. Some viewers report actually switching sides on Bear halfway through, starting in sympathy, ending in horror, which only works if you were standing somewhere near him to begin with. The internet has also spent months arguing about whether Nikki's love was real, which is Bear's question, asked by millions of people who apparently wanted the answer to that question too. And this movie's made hundreds of millions of dollars. The crowd is truth in this case. You don't get numbers like that from people gawking at a stranger's pathology. You get them from that hint of recognition and perhaps, might we even say, a little bit of guilt, a guilty pleasure. So if the label was just somewhere safe to put all of those fears, what do we actually do with it? What do you do about a question that has no answer? Can we ever know somebody loves us? The film's honest answer is no. Bear's problem isn't that a curse scrambled his evidence or didn't present it or whatever. He had years of straightforward, uncompelled, curse-free evidence, a real friendship, real kindness, real Tuesday afternoons, and he misread all of it. He didn't know about Ian. He didn't know Nikki thought of him as a little brother, even though she probably showed it to him all the time. He had the best data a person can get on this stuff, gathered slowly, in total freedom, and he built a fantasy out of it anyway. But, we're letting ourselves off the hook again, aren't we? Because when answering the question, can we ever know if somebody loves us? Well, time and freedom shrink that doubt, and more evidence and knowledge and all of that shrink that doubt. but they never abolish it. There's always a gap, a bit of uncertainty. There is no final test, no final way of knowing. That's just the nature of the ultimately unknowable beings that we are. So what do we do with that? There's a philosopher that I wish somebody had introduced Bear to. It's Iris Murdoch. She wrote that love is an extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real. Yes, I know that sounds a little trite and perhaps a bit odd, but consider it again. The extremely difficult realization, meaning that most of us, most of the time, are kind of failing it, is that something other than oneself is real and matters. Other people, Murdoch says, mostly exist for us a lot of the time as characters in the film we're starring in, and the enemy of love for her isn't hatred or even cruelty, it's fantasy. The ego's dream machine, busily converting every person we meet into material for our own lives. So learning to love for her is learning to appreciate the depth and the breadth of that otherness, that difference, the wild, hidden internal lives, the interests, passions, the histories of others. It's almost Buddhist in its simplicity and in its profoundness. Love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real. If we look at Bear through that lens, then because Bear has an enormous amount of information about Nikki ostensibly. He knew what songs he thought she was in. He knew what her phone call meant to him after Nana died. He knew what her kindness felt like, what her attention was worth, what her love would prove. But every item in his evidence file is about what Nikki does for Bear's inner life. Her actual desires, her actual history, her actual separateness, the entire person standing next to him at that register for years, he never mentions in the films. He didn't fail to feel enough. He just aimed all of it at a character he'd written and invented. Bear loved the role that Nikki played in the story of himself. And the wish is just that self-love and that self-narrative given ultimate power and free reign. Murdoch's word for the alternative to this is attention. And strangely, if you've seen in our video of the House of the Dragon, this is a complete accident, but it's meaningful maybe, is that it's the philosopher Simone Weil's solution to the problem of force and violence too. Attention. The generosity of paying true attention to the other. Not an instrumentalized, objectifying attention, but the slow, unglamorous, ongoing work of actually looking at the other person as they are and not as your need requires them to be. It's often all other people in our lives, even strangers, are asking us for. And here's what makes it an answer to this film, I think, rather than a self-help slogan. Attention doesn't produce certainty either. Nothing produces certainty. Attention just means that the person you can't fully know is at least the real one you're trying to get towards. And that's also why, for me, that phone call with the One Wish Willow representative haunts the whole film. And now, me too. It's that just because you chose this for her doesn't make it less real. If Bear was paying attention to Nikki, the real Nikki, and not the one he made up, then perhaps he could have chosen something meaningful for her. Perhaps the whole tragedy could have been avoided. Perhaps he could have avoided choosing anything for her at all and letting her appear to him as she is. It has that real Shakespeare feel at the end too, where, well, everyone's dead due to one man's flawed choice. And his only sin, really, the original one, is not seeking to know the real person because it could have erased the fictional one that he'd written for himself. So, well done, Kari Barker. Especially well done to Indy Navarrete and the whole cast, really, and everyone who put this film together. For me, it's not just horror, it's a tragedy. It's deeply relatable and it's shocking to boot. It asks a question we can't answer, but it shows that we do still need to find some tentative, better ways of answering it anyway. And what could be more philosophical than that? But that's it for this episode of Philosophical Film Club. So until next time, be wise and be kind, and maybe just get flowers next time.